Okay, so we've hit 50, so I think we can begin. People will naturally keep on
Okay.
connecting. Is that okay with everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to begin by thanking today's participants. I know that people are joining in from their phones, their tablets, their computers, and so on, and we have people from all over the world, literally, which is very positive. And I'd like to just say that we're happy to have you today here with us. I'd also like to thank today's speakers and panelists that helped to make this event possible. We have with us Ilias Strachinis, dear friend and colleague, one of the very few capable herpetologists in the country, I might add. Some people from Greece might know him he was the host of a documentary series that was a show at the same time called Wild Greece. And he's also a PhD candidate within my department, the Department of Biology, Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and very close to finishing his thesis on phylogeography and phylogenetics. Thank you for being with us, Ilias.
Thank you too. It's my pleasure. Can I begin?
No, but just one second.
Okay.
At the same time, we're delighted to have Professor David Warrell. Now, I can go on and just list all the qualifications, but I will try to refrain from doing exactly that. He's one of the world's leading figures in tropical medicine, with extensive experience and one of the very few experts on the snakebite issue and the clinical aspect of it, all the way from Oxford University, advisor to the World Health Organization and to the British Army. And I will stop because I can't carry on forever. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.
We also have in the panel associate professor from the Department of Medicine, Aristotle University of Thessaloniki again, Mrs. Varvara Fidanidou. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, it's my honor to join you in this panel.
You're very welcome. She's also the head of the emergency department, the General University Hospital of Thessaloniki. And at the same time, we're hoping to have essentially someone from the Medical School of Athens. They couldn't be here with us today due to a pressing personal issue. Associate Professor Stelios Hadjipanagiotou. He's also the head of the Department of Medical Biopathology. He sends his best, and he hopes that in a similar event in the future, we can all participate together and he can attend as well. I'd also like to thank Professor Abatzopoulos from the Department of Biology, a great facilitator. Without him, this series of webinars would never have happened. Yannis Sarigiannis, Associate Professor from the School of Pharmacy, University of Nicosia, Cyprus, a great new collaboration, and Ronald Jenner from the European Venom Network for his support. Now, I'd briefly like to mention that these events are an important occasion because we managed to increase the awareness on various subjects like the venomic analysis, the proteomic analysis of the venoms that we have, the snakebite issue, the antivenom production, things that in Greece we're not really aware of. And through that, we're building a network by addressing and filling the gaps that exist. And I can just give an example. That is today's event. The previous event on antivenom production with Jose Maria Gutierrez, who I'm sure would love to be here with us today, but he's in Costa Rica, so it's like early in the AM. And collaborations have emerged, and this is a very positive outcome. We have kicked off after the first webinar last year, our collaboration with Juan Jose Calvete, all the way from Valencia, Spain. If you're watching this, hello. And on the venomics and anti-venomics on Greek viper species that we had no idea about. So that's certainly a positive outcome, like I said. We're really hoping that people will notice that initiatives will emerge, more initiatives than have already. and that collaborations will be facilitated, right? There is opportunity in this, and I put that on quotations for various aspects of these issues. And yeah, today's event will revolve around the venomous species of Greece, the snakebite and the anti-venom issue within the country, globally, and the European continent. I also like to highlight that no one gets paid for, because I've gotten a lot of emails, no one gets paid for or paid by today's event. Everyone is participating by donating their own time, their own personal time, and we thank them for it. Questions can emerge through the form of a Q&A, so you can just post your question through the Q&A, or you can send it to me directly. The previous times I got more questions directly than in the Q&A section, so I'm just letting people know they can use both. And we will carry on with the structure of we will have the talks and the Q&A at the end, so that if people want to leave and want to attend other matters, they can do that. And I have to say that the QR codes will be used throughout at least one of the presentations. So if someone wants to use their phone to scan the QR codes, to see some more pictures and photographic material, you're welcome to do so. So with this, I will conclude the introduction. And Ilias, you have the floor. You can begin by sharing your screen.
Okay, thank you. Just a sec. Can you see it now?
Absolutely.
Everything's good?
It's not in full screen. It's not the full screen one. So I don't know if you want to.
You don't see the full screen presentation now?
Yeah, we see the bit that has the slides to the left and the presentation to the right. So I think if you choose sharing the full screen version.
Which one is that?
No pressure. People are still joining in, which is interesting.
What about this now?
Yeah, this is great. Fantastic.
Okay.
Okay.
We made. So, hi everyone. For me, I'd like to thank you all for participating in this very interesting lecture today. Let's start by talking about snake bites worldwide. In a global scale, I have to introduce myself. I'm Ilias Strachinis. I'm a biologist and PhD candidate in the School of Biology in Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. I'm a member of Greek Herpetological Society and the owner of the website herpetofauna.gr, which is a website with that contains all reptiles and amphibians of Greece, with basic info and photos for each species. And of course, there are some interesting, useful articles as well, unfortunately only in Greek at the moment. So let's start by talking about snake bites worldwide. In a global scale, snake bites are a serious public health issue that affects mostly tropical and subtropical areas, as we will see later. And let's see some facts by the World Health Organization. It is estimated that around 5.4 million people are bitten each year, with up to 2.7 million envenomings. Around 81,000 to 138,000 people die each year because of snake bites. And we have around 3 times as many amputations and other permanent disabilities that are caused by snake bites annually. Most of this, of course, is happening to Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And envenoming affects people in poor rural communities in low and middle income countries, usually farmers. And of course, the highest burden occurs in countries where health systems are weakest and medical resources are sparse. Antivenoms could save those lives, but there's a series of problems which have to do with the huge geographical variation in venoms, the poor assessment of appropriateness of antivenoms, the unaffordable increased prices sometimes of antivenoms, wrong policies and weak regulation on the issue, lack of data and statistics, and low production of antivenoms. So what is going on in Europe? Fortunately for us, living in Europe, things are way much better. Snake bites in Europe are rare medical emergency cases and only sometimes severe and lead to complications. In the whole of Europe, including European Russia and Turkey, the number of snake bite cases is estimated from 7 to 9 snake bites annually. Around 15% of those are considered severe, and the average number of deaths per year is around 4. So as you can see, there's a huge difference between Europe and tropical areas on this issue. And how come? This is because the venomous European snakes have much weaker, much milder venom than those of the tropical areas, and which is mainly cytotoxic and much less neurotoxic. We have antivenoms available, and we, of course, have a better health systems than those areas I mentioned before. So let's go to Greece. According to the Poison Information Center, in Greece, we have up to 200 venomous snake bite incidents every year, and the deadly incidents are around 1 per 500 cases, which gives a number around 0.2% of the cases that are lethal. And as a rule, these cases concern elderly people and people with serious health problems, or serious mistakes during the first aid treatment by the victims themselves or laymen that are near, or rare cases of anaphylaxis that wasn't properly treated in time. So let's see a board with some indicative statistics, some indicative causes of death in Greece during the period from 2000 to 2014. It's a 15-year period. These statistics are obtained from the Hellenic Statistical Authority. So as you can see, we had in this period of time, we had 6 deaths by snake bite, which is as many as those from a dog attack. We had 15 people died from farm animals attack, 33 people by mosquito bites. Of course, this is indirectly by viral fever infection. 44 people died by thunderstrike, and 73 people died by bees, wasps, and hornets, probably by anaphylactic shock. So, before I show you how the dangerous snakes of Greece look like and how to distinguish them from the harmless ones, let me underline here that all snakes in Greece and Europe in general are wild and protected animals and not parasites, as many people still think of them. So all of the snakes in Greece are protected under at least one of these laws and directives. Are snakes useful to us? Yes, they are. They're a very important part of the food chain. This way, they contribute to well-balanced ecosystems from which our quality of life depends. They protect our crops by controlling populations of rodents and insects, which are enemies to our crops. They protect the public health from spread of disease. Snakes consuming rodents and insects that sometimes are bearers of contagious diseases. They are this way protecting us. And they contribute to the production of important drugs. Today, by taking advantage of specific toxins taken from snakes' venom, we can produce very important and very effective medicine. So let's now have a look on the Greek fauna regarding the snakes. In the whole of the country, we have in total 23 species of snake. 7 of them are venomous, but only 5 of them are dangerous, and they are all species of vipers. The rest of the 2 venomous species are not vipers. They belong to different families. They are Opistholepus, which mean rear-fanged snakes, which means that the teeth that inject the venom are located far back in the upper jaw in a position which is quite ineffective regarding envenomation in humans. Plus, the venom is really mild and cannot cause any serious damage to us, even if envenomation takes place. You can see here in the picture the position, the location where the teeth that ejects the venom is located in a rear-fanged snake, and in a Solinovolipus snake, which are the vipers. You can see the tooth here is located in the front of the upper jaw, and it is movable. So that's the difference between rear-fanged and Solinovolipus snakes. Vipers are all Solinovolipus snakes. Greek vipers' venom effects on the body. All venomous snakes' venom is actually a cocktail of different toxins. Vipers in Greece have mostly cytotoxic venom and far more or less neurotoxic, which means that their main effect is to break the lipid membrane of the cells, causing severe damage to the tissue. The most drastic proteins in Greek vipers' venom are the A2 phospholipases, disintegrin, snake venom serine proteases, snake venom metalloproteinases, and L-amino acid oxidase. Now, let's see now how to tell a viper from a harmless snake in Greece and in Europe in general. But let me underline here that everything you're about to hear and see from now on about identification, it only applies in European snakes, and in no case should be taken into account when we speak about snakes from other continents, because there things can even be the other way around. So keep this in mind. So all vipers of Europe, and of course in Greece, share 3 common characteristics. The first one is they have a stout body, which means they have a short and fat body compared to other snakes. They have a wide head, very wide and broad head, protruding cheeks, if you will. They have a short tail that narrows sharply. And there's another characteristic here marked with an asterisk. It is the zigzag pattern on their back, and I have marked this with an asterisk because it doesn't apply in all vipers of Europe. Not all vipers have these characteristics, only some of them. So this is why I marked this with an asterisk. On the we can see here some different individuals of vipers. Of the most common species of viper in Greece, the nose horn viper here and 2 of the Ottoman viper here. As you can see, they all have this robust, stout body, the broad head, and short tail that narrows sharply. And of course, they all have a zigzag pattern. This is not the case for all vipers, as I already said. So, on the contrary, harmless snakes of Greece, as a rule, they have narrow heads, they have elongated, slim bodies, and elongated tail that narrows gradually. These are the rules. There are some exceptions that we will see later. Here are some examples of harmless snakes of Greece. As you can see, they may have stripes, they may have blotches as a pattern, they may have spots, they may be uniform, but they all have elongated bodies and tails and relatively narrow heads. These are the 2 exceptions to these rules. The sandboa, Aex jaculus, which have a stout body and the short tail, which is also blunt. But if you will notice, the head is narrow, and the pattern is different than those of the vipers. And of course, the tail is blunt. And the European cat snake here, which has a broad head, a wide head too, but the body is very elongated and the tail is too, compared to a viper, which we can see here on the right. Here's another example of two snakes with similar coloration, and we can identify the viper just by the proportions of the body. So here we have a viper because the body is stout, the tail is short, and the head is wide. And here we have a humble snake because the body is elongated, the tail is elongated, and the head is narrow. Another example, a difficult one, we have two snakes with melanism, which is a condition when the animal is totally black because of a mutation in the genes that are responsible for the coloration. So we cannot see the typical pattern of these snakes. We only can see the proportions of the body. So as we can see, we have a snake with a stout body, a short tail that narrows sharply, and a broad head. That means this is a viper. And we have a harmless snake here, despite the fact that the head is a little bit broad, but we have an elongated body and tail. So let's now, what I want to say is that, so regardless of the coloration or the pattern, if we see those three aforementioned traits, all in combination, not just one of them alone, we know we're seeing a viper. There are species that can bear only one of these characteristics without being a viper. So it is important to identify all those three characters together at the same time. So now let's have a quick glance of all the species of vipers of Greece, just to have an idea. Let's start with the most common species of viper in Greece, the nose-horned viper, Vipera ammodytes. It is a highly adaptive species. It can be found in a huge variety of habitats and altitudes. It can be found active both during the day and the night when the temperatures are high, like in the summer. It is a slow-moving snake that will prefer to stay still in hide using its camouflage when it sees a predator rather than flee. And this applies to all European vipers. And this is how the accidents occur. Like, for example, if a farmer wants to cut a tomato from the tomato plant with bare hands, and there's a viper there, it sees the farmer, it feels threatened, so it coils up and in a high camouflage position. The farmer doesn't see the snake, reaches for the tomato and accidentally touches or grabs the snake, and then the snake bites the farmer as a defense. They're not aggressive animals. They're not going to come towards us to bite us. They will only bite as a defense. I forgot to say that in some slides we have QR codes, so you can scan with your phones anytime you want to go to the actual website on the internet. So here we have a QR code for the description page of the nose-horned viper that leads to the description page in herbofauna.gr. About Vipera ammodytes. We used to think that Vipera ammodytes, the nose-horned viper, is a distinct species in the Balkans. But recent phylogenetic studies have shown that the species is actually a species complex. And within it, we have many different evolutionary clades, which might as well be different species. So that could mean that every clade could have a different venom with regard to the composition and the potency. So let's keep this in mind for later, because this could mean problems in proper treatment of snake bites, depending on where the bite occurs geographically speaking. So as we can see here in this figure taken from Ursenbacher and colleagues, we have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different species of evolutionary clades, which could be also different species. So the second species of viper, quite common, especially on the East Aegean Islands, is the Ottoman viper, Montevipera xanthina. It's very similar to the nose-horn viper, but it is a little bit bigger. It gets a little bit bigger. It's more robust snake, and it's more, I can say, jumpy or nervous snake than the nose-horn viper. The third snake is the great meadow viper, Vipera greta, which is the smallest viper of Greece. It's actually a dark viper, and it's an alpine snake, an alpine viper. It only occurs on high altitudes and on some mountains of the Pindus mountain range, starting from 1,600 meters above sea level and above and higher. It has the weakest venom of all species of vipers in Greece, and this makes sense because it feeds mainly on crickets. Another snake, another viper in Greece is the adder. It is a snake that has a huge range across Europe and across the North Asia. In Greece, we have a different subspecies. You can see that it doesn't have a zigzag on its back. It has bars instead, perpendicular bars across its body, but it shows all the other 3 characteristics of the vipers: broad head, stout body, and a short leg that narrows sharply. It is also an alpine viper for us here in Greece, and we will only find it in high altitude as well. And last but not least, the Milos viper, which is endemic to Milos archipelagos. The typical phenotype of this species is this one, with grayish background and reddish or brownish squares of bars across the body. And there's a more rare phenotype, this one, of uniform coloration with the stunning orange color. So we can see here now a map showing the approximate distribution of all species of viper in Greece. It is important to know which area hosts which species. There are only a few small areas where we can find 2 species occurring together in sympathy. In most of the regions, we only have 1 viper or even none, like those islands with white color here, like on Crete, Rhodos, Karpathos, Kythera, Zakynthos, Limnos, Icaria, some Cyclades, etc. So the nose-horn viper with blue color, as you can see, it occupies almost the whole mainland, the whole Greek mainland, and many islands. The Ottoman viper with green color, you can see that it actually replaces the nose-horn viper on the East Aegean Islands, and it can be found in symmetry with the nose-horn viper in a small area here in Thrace. The Milos viper with red color only here is endemic to Milos archipelagos, which is Milos, Kimolos, Polygos, and Cypnos. The Greek meadow viper only on the top of some mountains across the Pindus mountain range, nowhere else. And last, the other with purple color, you can see we can find it only in 5 or maybe 6 mountains that are located exactly on the borders of the northern borders of our country. Now, I will also mention the two rear fan snakes, the two Epistolopus snakes of Greece. The first one is the Eastern Montpellier snake, and the other one is the European cat snake. These species are venomous, but they're rear fan. The European cat snake has a very weak venom, which cannot do us harm. Now, about the Eastern Montpellier snake, there is only one case of serious complications after a bite, not from the Eastern Montpellier snake, but from the Eastern Montpellier snake's close relative, the Western Montpellier snake, Malpolon monspesulanus. There is not a single one report of serious symptoms after a bite from the Eastern, as far as I know. I have personally got bitten dozens of times by Malpolon insignitus without having the slightest symptom, while tens of other herpetologists have also got bitten with only a few of them showing local swelling and itching only for a few hours. This, together with the fact that it is a rare fan snake and it is very fast and will flee immediately when sees, makes it actually a harmless one. We have to catch the snake on purpose and let it chew on you for a long time to get a venomous bite. But even then, we haven't seen any serious case yet. So I'm going to close this presentation with this slide. I'm not going to speak about medical issues, of course. This is not my field of expertise. But I will mention here some of the difficulties that occur on the proper treatment of snake bites in Greece. Like, for example, we use in Greece only one type of antivenom for all species. Like, for instance, if someone gets bitten in, for example, let's say Sydney, where only the Ottoman viper occurs, the hospital will administer an antivenom which is made against the nose horn viper's venom. This could be something problematic, I guess. Another problem is there is deficiency on the collection of statistical data. I mean, there is not a form that we can fill in the hospital after a snake bite with useful and interesting information that we could use afterwards to improve the treatment of snake bites in general. There is lack of antivenom in many hospitals, in many cases, we all know that. There's lack of knowledge on treating bites from exotic species. We recently have had an incident of a guy that was keeping more than 30 cobras in his apartment, and one day got bitten by one, and nobody knew how to treat this situation. So doctors started making calls to other doctors from abroad, searching for, looking for advice or a proper antivenom. So after a lot of effort and a lot of time, the proper antivenom was found in Cyprus and was sent to Greece. So the guy's life was safe after all. There's a poor communication between medics and herpetologists, and not only herpetologists, zoologists in general. I know a case of an island that has no vipers, but the hospital insists of supplying with snake antivenom, while at the same time they have a huge population of black widow spiders, which is the only dangerous spider in Greece, but they don't have spider antivenom in the hospital, which may need in some point in the future. And of course, there's a lack of relevant research, which we, as well as other teams, are now trying to initiate. So that's all for me. Thank you for your attention and for your time, and of course, your patience. And this is a Milos viper from Milos Island.
This is a very interesting picture.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Ilias. Very enlightening, to be honest. A lot of issues have been mentioned, and yes, we do have a question, and I have other questions in my personal DM section, but we will leave these for the end so that I can group them along with the upcoming questions, and we can get to it after Professor David Warrell's presentation. So, Professor David, you have the floor if you want to start your presentation.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Can you see? Can you see
Yes,
full screen?
absolutely.
Right. Well, I'm sorry about that delay. I'll launch then. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and apologies for that technical delay. In Greek mythology, the giant Tityus had his liver torn out every day by birds. But in fact, in this famous painting by Titian, which is in the Prado Museum in Madrid, you'll see that there's actually a much more dangerous element here, life-threatening element, which happens to be medically the most important viper in Greece, in modern Greece, which is Vipera ammodytes. I want to contrast first the situation of snakebite in the tropical world, in the developing world, epitomized by this very busy scene in a large hospital in West Bengal in India, where snakebite is a major public health problem. This map summarizes our best current data about the number of deaths occurring from snakebite in the different continents. So relatively few in the Western Hemisphere, very few in Europe, as Ilias has already said, an unknown number in Africa because reporting is very poor. And in Asia, we have the best figures, particularly from India, based on an excellently designed community-based survey, producing a direct estimate of 58,000 snakebite deaths a year in India, which is an enormous number. And do remember that the survivors of snakebite, lucky survivors, you might say, many of them are left with permanent physical or psychological disability, amounting to more than 6 million dalis. That's adjusted life years, disability adjusted life years. So an enormous residual morbidity, even in those lucky enough to survive a snakebite. Well, what is snake venom? We've already heard that it's a complex mixture here, milking a large South American pit viper, the Jaracusu, producing this rich yellow venom. Venoms are immensely complex. They're mixtures of more than 100 different proteins or polypeptides. There are 4 major families, and many of these compounds are toxins which target specific physiological receptors, this resulting from millions of years of evolution. These include the phospholipases A2 metalloproteinases, which are tissue damaging, serine proteases, which activate blood clotting, and neurotoxins, 3-finger toxins, but also cytotoxic 3-finger toxins. And there are some other important families of venom proteins. This picture from Juan Calvete shows how the true complexity of snake venoms is being revealed now by molecular studies, genomics, transcriptomics, and in this case, venomics or proteomics. And if we look now at the reverse phase high performance liquid chromatography of a small Costa Rican pit viper, Bothrechis lateralis, we can see the enormous number of different components, many of which, as I say, are toxins. So why should snakes end up with such complicated and varied and potent venoms? Well, of course, it's all to do with evolution and the evolutionary function of venoms, which you see here illustrated. A relatively small, thin snake here has managed to capture a very large, vigorous lizard. This is an agama lizard in Kenya. And it's able to catch it and bite it and envenom it. And the the lizard is immobilized, allowing the snake to swallow this very large prey. So here we see here the end point of evolution. So genes are selected that encode toxins immobilizing the prey by causing paralysis, shock or low blood pressure, massive blood clotting in the heart and great vessels, and intense pain, which is another strategy of distracting the prey and allowing the relatively small, thin and legless snake to capture it and kill it. Well, as Ilias mentioned, snake venom toxins have formed valuable blueprints or scaffolds for designing new drugs. And the greatest success is almost certainly the development of the angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors, or the ACE inhibitors. These are based on a carboxypeptide toxin discovered in the venom of a Brazilian pit viper, Bothrops jararaca, the jararaca, by Brazilian pharmacologists, and the discovery began in about 1948. Here is the snake involved. This particular toxin in the venom of the jararaca lowers blood pressure in two different ways. First of all, by inhibiting the conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2, and secondly, by potentiating bradykinin, an endogenous peptide which lowers blood pressure. And the structure of this toxin led scientists in Squibb Drug Company in 1980 to design the first of the synthetic ACE inhibitors, which is captopril. This was the first of a whole class of these drugs now taken by tens of millions of people, including myself, for high blood pressure, heart failure, myocardial infarction, and kidney disease. Well, I'm glad to say I don't suffer from all those diseases. And here is the structure of captopril, this founding member of the ACE inhibitor family. So why and where do snake bites happen in people? The epidemiology of snake bite is very much determined by weather, meteorology, heat, rain, cyclones, and flooding. As shown here, a scene from India during floods. This lady found that she was sharing her remaining dry space in her house with this large female Russell's viper. And snakes and humans also experience cycles of diurnal and seasonal activity. In the case of the snake, some of them hunt at night, so bites will be more common at night. They will be more active during their mating season. And in the case of humans, the activities are occupational, particularly to do with agriculture and herding. And this is true in Greece as well. And there are building projects, for example, building a large road through an Amazon jungle, and travel, which may also increase the risk of snake bite. And here are some examples of agricultural activity, which is the greatest occupational risk factor of snake bite worldwide. These barefooted and barehanded farmers in northern Nigeria risk bites from saw-scale vipers, Echis vipers, who've been hibernating in the fields during the cool season. And this typical scene in paddy fields, rice fields in Burma, showing again barefooted and barehanded farmers in fields that are full of Russell's vipers and cobras attracted by the rodents, in turn attracted by the rice crop. And there's a special risk in South Asia. If you sleep on the ground, you may be bitten by a night prowling crate, one of the dangerous elapid snakes of Asia. Then there are the intentional snake handlers, people in Southeast Asia, particularly snake restaurants, people who collect snakes for leather, performers, snake charmers, macho young men who like to show off handling snakes. There are rattlesnake roundups in America, and some religious groups handle snakes as a display of faith. And people keep exotic snakes as pets, as you heard already from Ilias. And then there are scientists like myself, herpetologists and toxinologists, who handle snakes professionally. So what is the outcome if a venomous snake bites you? One possibility is nothing at all, no envenoming. Envenoming, by the way, is the English word for injection of venom, or the effects of injecting venom. So there are dry bites where a venomous snake bites you, and there are fang punctures confirming that the fangs have penetrated the skin, but there's no subsequent evidence that venom was injected. This may happen as many as 50% of occasions, or even more with some species of snake, that there is a bite but no injection of venom. Or it may have been a bite by a non-venomous snake, or even by a snake-looking animal that isn't a snake at all. And here's an example of a non-venomous snake biting a friend of mine. However, if a venomous snake bites and injects its venom, the earliest signs of envenoming are usually local at the site of the bite, with progressive local painful and tender swelling. Blistering may develop due to increased permeability. The plasma is leaking into the tissues. Local bruising, and the worst and an irreversible result leading to much morbidity or persistent suffering in the survivor of a snake bite is necrosis or death of tissue, also called gangrene, seen here in a case of envenoming by a spitting cobra in Zimbabwe in Africa. Then there are systemic effects, life-threatening systemic effects of envenoming. First of all, a drop in blood pressure, which may be fatal, hypotension, illustrated here in patients from Burma and in Thailand. Spontaneous systemic bleeding, that's bleeding away from the site of the bite, seen clinically most readily in bleeding from the gums, from the gingival sulci, and confirmed by demonstrating that the blood will not clot, even if left in a glass tube, which would normally activate the clotting cascade. This indicates so-called consumption coagulopathy. The clotting factors have been consumed as a result of this cascade of procoagulant enzymes contained in the activated by the venom. Then there are neurotoxic effects, paralytic effects, a descending paralysis, starting with bilateral ptosis, and eventually life-threatening when it involves the bulbar muscles and the respiratory muscles. And myotoxicity, generalized myotoxicity, that's damage to skeletal muscles, also called rhabdomyolysis. The evidence here is myoglobinuria. The muscle pigment is leaking out into the urine. And finally, acute kidney injury is a common cause of, common type of life-threatening systemic envenoming. The kidneys may be damaged by prolonged low blood pressure, giving bilateral renal cortical necrosis, or more subtly by the deposition of fibrin microthrombi, so-called thrombotic microangiopathy, seen here in the glomerular and peritubular blood vessels, the fibrin staining red in this Masson trichrome stain. So how should you treat snakebite when it happens? The first aid. The aim should be to immobilize the whole body of the victim, especially the bitten limb, to reduce spread of venom from the site of the bite. Remove tight objects on the bitten limb and apply a pressure pad immediately over the bite site and immobilize the bitten limb. You must never apply a tight band, a tourniquet, which would occlude the arterial circulation to the bitten limb, because this will cause gangrene. The victim should be transported rapidly, but safely, and also as passively as possible, to a place where they can receive medical care. This shows the local pressure pad immobilization method, which is now recommended for first aid. So a pad of any convenient material, a bandage, clothing, approximately the size of your fist, is applied directly over the site of the bite and tightly bound on with a non-elastic bandage. And finally, the limb is splinted to minimize movement. The medical treatment of the victim in hospital will start with a rapid clinical assessment, and resuscitation may be required. And don't forget, snakebite can be very painful. It's important to try and determine which species of snake was involved, because that will prepare you for likely complications. You must look for signs of envenoming, which will determine whether the only specific antidote, the antivenom or antiserum, is indicated. And antivenom is needed if there's extensive or rapidly progressive local envenoming, especially involving fingers and toes, or if there's systemic envenoming. I've already mentioned shock, bleeding, clotting disorders, and evidence of paralysis. The key medical treatment for severe envenoming is antivenom, seen here being administered intravenously by slow intravenous injection by a doctor with a nurse standing by, and with drugs available, particularly adrenaline or epinephrine, in case the patient develops an early adverse reaction to antivenom in the form of an anaphylactic attack. You can reduce the risk of antivenom reactions by giving prophylactic adrenaline or epinephrine subcutaneously. This is the adult dose. Antivenom ideally should be administered by slow intravenous injection or infusion, but I'm aware, thanks to information from Thomas Daftios, that in Greece, the only antivenom currently available must be given intramuscularly, and I'll talk about that later. Observe the response to antivenom, beware of early anaphylactic reactions, which can be effectively treated with adrenaline, and repeat the dose of antivenom if necessary. Ancillary treatments involve supporting failing systems, such as mechanical ventilation or renal replacement therapy, and looking after the bitten limb. Don't forget to give a tetanus toxoid booster, because these are penetrating injuries which may introduce the risk of tetanus. Surgical debridement of dead tissue may be involved. And is the wound infected? And then rehabilitation, restoration of function of the bitten limb is important. Here are two examples of supporting failing systems. This man is paralyzed after a cobra bite in Nepal, and his breathing is being supported manually, and that will save his life. And this lady in Burma is being given peritoneal dialysis for acute kidney injury caused by a Russell's viper. Now I want to focus, that was the picture internationally, where snakebite is an extremely important public health problem. Now I want to focus on Greece, and my knowledge here is largely second-hand, although, as I'll say later, I have actually advised on the treatment of a large number of patients bitten by snakes in Greece. I'll come to that later. So the key question is snakebite really a problem in Greece? Is this something we should really be thinking about and taking time to consider? Well, according to the published literature, there were no deaths in Greece, according to this highly cited global survey by Kasturiratne et al. And among between 10 and 228 bites a year in your then population of over 11 million, the incidence of snakebite was only about 5 per 100,000 population per year. And in a second published study by Jean-Philippe Chipot in 2013, again, 0 deaths. Well, we've already heard this morning from Ilias that during the 14 years, 2000 to 2014, there were actually 6 deaths in Greece. That's new information for me, and that's very important. a survey of adult residents of Eastern Macedonia and Central Thrace found that the attitude of people to snakes was generally intolerance, although they did support conservation of snakes, which is good to hear, both non-venomous and venomous species. And this was the graphic from that particular study of attitudes of Greek population, the Greek population, to snakes, both venomous and non-venomous. Then we could look in the published Greek medical literature. There have been 2 case series of bites by your most important venomous snake, Vipera ammodytes, the snub-nosed viper. From Patras, 147 cases of ammodytes bite over 15 years, and I see that only 8% of these patients were treated with antivenom. And then in northwestern Greece, a series of 12 cases, also ammodytes bites, on fingers and toes, and these received conservative treatment only. They didn't require surgery, and no antivenom was given. Then, also in the Greek medical literature, there are reports of some very severe cases of Vipera ammodytes bite, alerting you all to the potential of a fatal bite in Greece. And I now know that fatal bites have occurred in the last periods, as you've just heard. So these are case reports. First of all, from Argos, a case of multiple cerebral hemorrhages in a patient who was hypertensive and was treated with an unknown antivenom provided by the Pasteur Institute in Athens. Then in Patras again, a patient who developed severe chest pain and electrocardiographic abnormalities, suggesting an inferior myocardial ischemia, but was shown to have normal coronary arteries. This was diagnosed as a Kunis type 1 syndrome. And also from northwestern Greece, a case of pulmonary embolism in a child with a rare inherited disorder called Diamond-Blackfan syndrome, anemia, who probably had increased susceptibility to thrombotic episodes because of iron loading as a result of the transfusion he received. And then in eastern Greece, a case of massive intravascular hemolysis treated with antivenom, the very good but now unfortunately not manufactured Zagreb antivenom raised against the venom of Vipera ammodytes. Then there was this interesting report about farming injuries in Greece. We can see from the other published papers that the usual victims of snakebite in Greece are farmers, either men or women. And from this particular survey, migrant workers, they report that snake and insect bites are common among younger migrant workers during summer. They affect the upper limbs during manual work close to the ground, as you can see below. Well, this is Ilias's excellent map, very helpful map, illustrating the important distribution of venomous species with these exciting island populations, which he's discussed. And all I can add to his excellent picture is to remind you that of the population in Cyprus. And in Cyprus, they have this large viper, Macrovipera lebetina, which has caused some fatalities in Cyprus. So going through the Greek venomous species, but now with an emphasis on the clinical effects of envenoming, we've heard about Vipera ammodytes, usually 50 to 70 centimeters in length. Here are some extraordinarily colored specimens from Macedonia, specimen I photographed, and also from Greece and elsewhere, showing the variation in color and patterns. There's marked variation in the effects and severity of envenoming as reported in the medical literature from Vipera ammodytes. And this species complex, as we've now heard, from the Urson Barker et al. Paper of 2008, is crying out for genomics experts like my friend Juan Calvete in Valencia to look at to compare the genomics of populations of these different members of the species complex. The usual symptoms involve local pain, swelling and bruising, with the possibility of necrosis, especially on bites of the fingers and toes, but also risk of local thrombophlebitis, infection and enlargement of local lymph nodes draining the site of the bite. There's also mentioned the potential risk of compartment syndrome. I'll mention that a bit later. And here are some illustrations, both from the Greek literature and from the Croatian literature. Croatia seems to see the most severe manifestations of Vipera amidites envenoming. And here is what I think was an unnecessary fasciotomy. Fasciotomy is an extensive surgical incision to open a tight fascial compartment containing muscles which, it is argued, are so swollen as a result of the snakebite envenoming that the arterial blood supply is compromised. But in fact, although the clinical features may suggest compartment syndrome in snakebite, in fact, true compartment syndrome confirmed by measurements of pressure inside the compartment usually dismiss this diagnosis. And the role of fasciotomy, of opening up the fascial compartment, is now highly controversial. And most authorities now regard this as being a surgical intervention that is rarely, if ever, required. This is an example of a severe envenoming in Greece. I mentioned with the multiple cerebral hemorrhages in this lady who was hypertensive and was bitten by a Vipera amidites. Other severe clinical effects of amidites envenoming, including coagulopathy and bleeding with thrombocytopenia, evidence of severe gastrointestinal hemorrhage, and shock or hypertension from hypovolemia or from anaphylaxis or myocardial damage. I mentioned one of the Greek cases where myocardial involvement was confirmed, the Kunis type 1 syndrome, thought to be caused by activation of the system. Neurotoxicity has been reported from Croatia, but not, I think, reliably from Greece so far. This child is said to be showing early signs of ptosis. This child from Split in Croatia, caused by the local Vipera amidites. The earliest sign of neurotoxicity is bilateral ptosis, followed by ophthalmoplegia, and then problems with swallowing, speaking, and then possibly more progressive weakness, although life-threatening neurotoxicity has never been reported with any Vipera species. Generalized muscle breakdown has been rarely reported, and this report from Split in Croatia confirms the possibility of fatal envenoming, particularly in children. Well, now my own experience of treating snakebite in Greece has been at a distance, I might say. It's involved travelers asked my advice after being bitten, often in your beautiful islands in Greece. And these were mainly British travelers, but also some non-British ones. And also I've been asked advice about Greek patients bitten in various parts of Greece. So that's how I've accumulated some, albeit second-hand experience of the problems of managing snakebite in Greece. So one particular case, this was an English herpetologist who was bitten in the beautiful island of Ios. This is the story, bitten on the wrist while he was handling a snake intentionally. I already mentioned that herpetologists are at risk in the course of their scientific profession, you might say. He developed numbness, swelling, and tenderness, which extended up his forearm. After 10 minutes, he was seen by a local doctor. That's very prompt treatment. He was given a local injection at the site of the bite, not sure what it was, thought it might be adrenaline. That's certainly very unusual treatment. He was also given an adrenaline injection in his abdomen, again, very unusual treatment for snakebite, unless he had signs of anaphylaxis, which, according to the patient, he did not. He was then given a large dose of a potent corticosteroid, and he had contacted me at that time. I suggested he stop these tablets and that he traveled to the nearest hospital for blood tests and possible antivenom treatment. So following my advice, he hurried as quickly as he could to Santorini Island Hospital, where they found he had a raised white blood cell count. This confirms systemic envenoming by this viper. But he was not given antivenom. He was treated with antibiotics, although there was no evidence of infection. And he was observed for only 12 hours and then discharged. And this is his own picture of the bite after 10 minutes, showing the rather wide spacing of the fang marks after 6 hours with swelling extended up his forearm. So I think that's typical of most of the cases I've been asked about from Greece, relatively mild local envenoming, sometimes with confirmation of mild systemic envenoming in the form of inflammatory neutrophil leukocytosis, and sometimes very mild coagulopathy, abnormal fibrinogen or other blood clotting factors. So I'd just like to go through the different species already beautifully described and illustrated by Ilias, mentioning what is known of their clinical effects. So starting with the Bosnian subspecies of the adder, Vipera berus. This is Vipera berus bosniensis, found illustrated here, found in Greece. Common effects of envenoming are local swelling, local envenoming, and patients may develop an early anaphylactic syndrome. So anaphylaxis, so gastrointestinal symptoms, fainting with shock, swelling of the tongue, lips, and gums and throat, skin effects, urticaria, an itchy raised rash, asthma-like bronchospasm, and fever. Rare severe effects of adder bite would include systemic bleeding and coagulopathy, in children particularly acute kidney injury, and various cardiac arrhythmias with electrocardiographic abnormalities. And mild neurotoxicity has been confirmed from the same subspecies in Hungary, but not in Greece, by my colleague Tamas Malina in Hungary, showing here external ophthalmoplegia caused by this Vipera berus bosniensis in Hungary. As you've heard from Ilias, the Greek meadow viper, Vipera graeca, is causes the mildest symptoms, only very mild local and systemic envenoming. Antivenom is unnecessary. When this snake was regarded as a subspecies of Vipera ursinii, we had to bear in mind that other subspecies of Vipera ursinii, as you can see here, Racosiensis and Moldavica, had, according to historical records, caused fatal envenoming. But I totally agree with Ilias that this is a virtually harmless snake, or capable only of causing mild local envenoming. There's the famous Milos viper, and 2 specimens I was able to photograph and a picture by my colleague Matt Wilson in Sufnos. And despite its impressive size and possibly its venom composition, there's been no published account of bites by this species, although I'm sure some herpetologists have been bitten and the symptoms not recorded. I'd be interested to hear about that. But there's one historical, at least opinion, from Bullinger's Snakes of Europe, published in 1912, 1913. On Milos, Dr. de Bedriaga observed this much dreaded snake, the bite of which is probably as bad as that of its Indian ally, the daboya, that's Russell's viper. Well, that's just an old literature opinion. The Ottoman viper, as you've heard, is the longest of the Greek vipers. In fact, there have been very few reported bites, none from Greece. It's reported to cause massive local swelling, increased neutrophil leukocytosis, increased levels of creatine kinase, suggesting muscle damage, and coagulopathy. Then there's non-front-fanged snake, the eastern Montpellier snake, Malpelon insignatus, can grow to a length of 180 centimeters. In the case of the western species, Malpelon non-specialanus, as Ilias mentioned, there have been a few cases reported from Spain and France of definite neurotoxicity, mild, non-life-threatening neurotoxicity caused by this non-front-fanged snake. See here the position of the fangs at the back of the mouth and in this skull. So this snake, as Ilias has said, has never been reported to cause more than very mild local swelling in Greece. And here is one example of local swelling caused again by the western species Malpelon insignatus. So what about snakes by indigenous Greek species? What are the special considerations in Greece? Well, as you've heard already, there's uncertainty about how frequent and how severe these bites are. There's a lack of publications, a lack of formal surveillance. So I would support Ilias's plea that we need more information. Species diagnosis is very important, and some of the Greek species are nearing endangered status. Since bites are rare, you could forgive doctors for lacking training and experience. And as I've already emphasized, there have been very few publications from Greece to guide treatment. I think it's fair to say that most bites in Greece cause mild or no envenoming, and so the potential severity may be underestimated. And I've emphasized that there is the potential. There have been deaths in Greece. There have been published cases of severe life-threatening envenoming by Vipera amidites in Greece. There are widespread reports of inappropriate drugs being used, particularly corticosteroids. They have no role in the management of snakebite, and routine prophylactic antibiotics, which are usually not needed. And also a discussion of surgery, fasciotomy, which again is very unlikely to be needed. Greece may need some national guidelines and expert opinion available from your National Poisons Advice Centre. In the case of the United Kingdom, we rely heavily on toxbase, and there is a big problem with antivenom. The only antivenom now available being an intramuscular antivenom, as I've said already. So thanks to information from Thomas Daftios, I learned that antivenoms in Greece are procured through the Pasteur Institute in Athens. In the recent past, you've been able to use the French Vipafav and a polyvalent antivenom from Turkey called Polycera. But currently, only a Bulgarian antivenom called Bull Bio, raised against the venom of Vipera amidites. It's a pepsin digested, an FAB prime 2 IgG fragment, and it's manufactured by a company owned by the Bulgarian Ministry of Health. And this is the important limiting factor with this antivenom. It can be administered only by intramuscular injection, according to the manufacturers, which implies that it's not safe to be administered by the ideal method, which is intravenous injection or infusion. Well, there are real problems about having an antivenom that can only be given intramuscularly. This is illustrated by these unpublished data of my colleague Dave Theakston and myself. And here we've compared in some human patients, 9 patients in each group. One group were given the antivenom intravenously. So you see that this is the concentration of antivenom in the blood, a rapid increase to high therapeutic levels of antivenom, declining over the next 48 hours. This is compared with the 9 patients in whom the antivenom was given intramuscularly, the dashed line here. You'll see the very slow increase in blood levels of therapeutic antivenom over the next hours and days following intramuscular injection. So the problem with intramuscular antivenom is that its bioavailability is delayed and incomplete. And this I regard as a severe obstacle to treating a severe snakebite in Greece at the moment, given that your only available antivenom is one that must be given by intramuscular injection. Finally, a topic touched on by Ilias, bites by exotic venomous species in Greece. And this was my introduction to Thomas Daftsios, so I must be grateful, I suppose, for the poor chap who was bitten by a Naiakouthia in Greece, a pet snake. The species may well be known, but its precise geographical origin may not. And we're now aware of enormous geographical variation in venom composition, even within the same species. So this can be a problem. Some people are breeding hybrids in captivity, and this is a real nightmare for the treating doctor if the patient has been bitten by a hybrid between 2 other species. So how on earth do you choose an appropriate antivenom? The names used by the owner of the pet snake may be highly misleading. For example, in the United Kingdom, people claim to have been bitten by a hog-nosed viper. In fact, it's not a viper at all. It's a non-front-fanged, mildly venomous snake called Heterodon. The Greek genus is called Heterodon, hog-nosed snakes. The victims may be very reluctant to admit that they've been bitten because the snake may have been kept in captivity illegally. I don't know what the law is in Greece, but in the United Kingdom, you're not allowed to keep dangerous snakes in captivity unless you have a license from DEFRA. And these people bitten by their pet snakes may be very slow to present. And if they've been bitten by this particular pet snake previously, they may have become hypersensitized. And so they may develop anaphylaxis when they're bitten again, or they may have become hypersensitive to the antivenom if they've been treated before. There may be difficulties and delays in attaining specific antivenom. Have you heard from Thomas the delay in getting antivenom from Cyprus for a patient bitten by a cobra in Greece? And there's a risk that bites will be by very rare species popular in captivity whose venom has an unknown medical potential. Well, I'm grateful to you for your attention, and I'm sorry again about the slight delay at the start. And I hope very much that this session today will stimulate the sort of interest in venomous snakes of Greece, and I hope their conservation, as well as warning people about potential dangers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor David. You're most welcome. There are quite a few questions. So by my count is about 16 of them or 17, because I have personal messages as well. So I would suggest that we take a 10-minute break or 5-minute break, whatever you would prefer, to catch your breath, because they are a few. So we can say that we will be back in, well, 7 minutes from now. Okay?
Right.
Fantastic. Okay. So I have gathered the questions. I think we can resume with the Q&A section. Let's see, quite a lot of them. This is a question that, okay, so it reads, there was an alleged case of migrants being bitten by a scorpion and/or a viper. Would you be aware of these cases and if they actually happened? That is interesting. We have discussed about this in the past. Do you want to? Is there any data on it? I would think not.
So Thomas, can you make the question again?
Yes. Professor David, can you hear me?
Yes. Well,
Okay.
I remember discussing this case with you, Thomas,
Mm-hmm.
because it came up in the media, and it was on a river in the area which is occupied by 2 species of viper, as we saw from Ilias's map.
Yeah.
And I think we decided, we explored it, that it was probably a put-up. It was a scam of some sort. I don't know whether Ilias got any more information about it.
No, I haven't got any more information. At first, it was like a hoax or something, because we never had a death incident by a scorpion bite. But honestly, I don't have any more information about this incident. I don't know what happened really.
Okay, but I can use this question to segue to the next one, which refers to the 2 parts. One is for Ilias, if hybridization between Greek viper species actually happens. And the other part is Professor David, but I think you touched on it on your presentation anyway, but if there was, or if there is, hybridization between Greek viper species, what would happen on the clinical side of things? So Ilias, I think you can just respond with that.
Yeah, we haven't witnessed hybridization between Greek vipers in the wild, but I know that almost all vipers from Vipera genus can hybridize in captivity.
Okay,
But
so that
we
is an
haven't
fact.
witnessed a hybrid viper in the wild in Greece.
So that would apply to private, let's say, collectors actually having them and keeping them and breeding them. Okay. The second question is for Professor David. We also have medical school students here, and the question reads, are there neurotoxic snake or spider I apologize, that's not the correct question. Yeah, what is the difference between cytotoxic and neurotoxic venom?
Well, that's a very fundamental difference. Neurotoxic venoms block neuromuscular transmission. So there's progressive paralysis. And in the Greek context, this doesn't happen with any of your indigenous species, but it could happen through a bite by a pet snake. For example, a cobra, as we've heard. We know that there are some monocled cobras, Nicosia, being kept in Greece, certainly, and that could cause paralysis. And progressive paralysis, which descends, can kill the patient when it paralyzes the bulbar and respiratory muscles. Cytotoxicity is damage of tissues, death of tissue, caused by those potent enzymes I mentioned, particularly the phospholipases A2 and the zinc metalloproteinases, but also some three-finger peptides, so-called three-finger structure peptides, are cytotoxic as well. So that's a very fundamental difference. Cytotoxic effects will be seen in local envenoming, so local swelling, tenderness, and so on, and in some cases, ultimately, death of tissue. Whereas neurotoxicity is a systemic effect of envenoming, which will present earliest with ptosis. I'm not sure how you pronounce ptosis in Greece.
Yeah.
Is it ptosis?
Ptosis. We
Ptosis.
have a P in, yeah.
Ptosis. It's a marvelous word, and it's a very important word in snakebite medicine, because it's not enough just to look at the patient and think, oh, the eyes seem to be a bit closed. That is not precise enough. You have to formally test by asking them to look upwards like that to see if they can reveal the whole of the pupil. And if the sign is positive, if they do have bilateral ptosis, then that's a very important evidence of very early neurotoxicity.
Mm-hmm. So the next question reads, are there dangerous neurotoxic snake or spider species in Greece? This question has been answered in part, but if
you mentioned that the black widow spider, that's the genus Latrodectus, occur in Greece, and they are neurotoxic spiders. They have a slightly different type of neurotoxicity from venomous snakes, because spider venoms release mediators. So the effect of severe black widow spider bite would be muscle spasms, fasciculations and spasms, painful spasms, which can be very persistent indeed and very unpleasant.
Ilias, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think during this summer, there was a case of a spider bite, a black widow spider bite, not too far from Thessaloniki in the city of Ceres. Am I correct?
I think we heard about 2 cases in the media, not just one. Yeah, we have such incidents, I think every year we can hear something about someone bitten by a spider and have that kind of spasms. And these effects from the spider's venom, which is typical for the Latrodectus bites.
Okay.
There
The next,
actually, Thomas, for completeness, there is another dangerous spider, which I believe occurs in Greece, and that's Loxosceles, a brown blue spider.
Yeah.
This causes local tissue damage. It's a classical dermonecrotic, skin-killing venom, which can produce quite a large area, usually only about 1 or 2, about 5 centimeters in diameter. And bites by these Loxosceles are being described increasingly from the Mediterranean area.
Yeah, it is the Mediterranean Loxosceles, the violent spider. It causes local necrosis, but I'm not including it in the dangerous spiders because we don't have cases of death caused by this spider. So it seems that it only causes some mild symptoms and severe necrosis locally, but locally. So I don't think it's dangerous in a way that you can die if you get bitten by it. But yes, you have to go to a hospital, of course.
am I correct in assuming that the scientific taxonomic name is Loxosceles rufescens? Is this the one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I will just put it in the chat if someone
I
wants
have
to.
it included in my book, this is Loxosceles.
Lovely.
And these are the black widow spiders.
Excellent.
Phenotypes.
Great. So the next question has 2 parts as well. The first goes to Ilias. It reads, is it legal to keep exotic snake species in Greece?
I'm sorry, I have internet problem, connections.
Okay, so the question is if it is legal to keep exotic snake species, venomous snake species in Greece? Or should I frame it, is there no legal background at all that regulates this?
This is what I was about to say, that there isn't a certain legal frame for these things. We
Okay,
don't
so
understand, is it or not illegal to keep a venomous snake in Greece? Because you can have a snake in Greece as a pet as long as you have the legal papers, but nothing is said about the venomous ones.
So would I be correct in assuming that both of the speakers' opinion would be that this should be a matter that has to be regulated at some point?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm
Professor.
afraid so. I don't like excessive regulation, but because of the increase in popularity of keeping venomous, dangerous snakes, it's a sort of macho symbol to have a really dangerous animal in your home, and we know that this popularity is increasing. It's absolutely massive in the United States, but it's increasing in Europe, and there are you can go to sales in Holland, in the Netherlands, for example. You can buy some of those very rare snakes that I listed in my last slide. Enormous potential for causing human disease and death, and you can buy these without any constraint at all. And so I'm afraid this is an area where one should introduce regulation.
Just like you mentioned in the United Kingdom, when it is regulated through a specific license, and there have to be steps, am I correct?
Yeah.
In keeping that. Okay, so
also in a way the benefit of the animal too, because we tend to think just
welfare.
human danger, but a lot of these illegally held reptiles are kept under miserable conditions, cruel conditions.
Which brings me to the next bit of this question, still the same question, the same person. What is the course of action if a case of a snake bite, an exotic snake bite, occurs within Greece? What does the patient do? I think we have to assume that, you know, illegal snake species, not the Greek viper species. So what would be the course of action that they would have to follow if they were to get bitten? Whichever one.
Well, I can tell you what happens in the United Kingdom. I mentioned Toxbase. Our medical people, most of whom have had absolutely no experience at all of snakebite, even of Viperoberus, but our only indigenous venomous species. Most British medical practitioners had no experience at all. They contact Toxbase, and they will be put in touch with a consultant very quickly. And it's actually how I've accumulated a lot of fascinating experience over many years, being rung up at 1 o'clock in the morning because someone has been bitten by something. And very often we can coordinate this. So a photograph of the exotic snake can be sent to an expert and rapidly identified. And then we can put them in touch with a supply of the Department of Health in UK keeps a supply of antivenoms, which we hope to design to cover all known and most and likely unknown exotic species held in UK, as well as our own indigenous Viperoberus. So that will be the course of action here. So expert advice from the National Poison Center.
Great. So back to the original question that was asked before for Ilias, which again reads, do we have viper species in Crete? What is going on? A lot of local folklore, a lot of information about vipers. So are there any vipers in Crete, and are there vipers on Rhodes, on the island of Rhodes?
No, we don't. Let me show you once again the screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
This is the map I've shown before. All islands that are not colored, they're actually white, are viper-free islands. They don't have vipers on them. So as you can see, Crete, Rhodes, Carpathos, and all of these islands that are white don't host vipers.
Okay. And another question from Thanos Papahoras reads, in cases of viper sympatry in the northern part of Greece, I assume it's this exact map that you have. Have there been any known interactions between the species?
It seems that there is competition between the two species, and this makes sense. They're both vipers. They have similar ecological niche. So we have witnessed competition with the winner being the Ottoman viper. It's like the Ottoman viper. What's the word? What's the word in English for
To scare away?
The nose horn viper at the
Overthrow, yes.
Yeah, in the ideal habitat for the Ottoman viper, because the Ottoman viper, the habitat of the forest habitat, it's not, the forested areas in Thrace are not very suitable for the Ottoman viper, as it seems. So in the ideal habitat for the Ottoman viper, we are witnessing strong competition, with Ottoman viper being the winner in this competition. We can still find some individuals of nose-horn viper living in Zimbabwe in low densities, but still.
Okay. So the next question reads, do we have any information regarding the quantity of venom that a viper releases when it bites, and whether that is influenced by other factors? And there's a parenthesis that says, for example, if the snake feels more threatened, will it release more venom? Ilias?
It seems though, yeah. In my experience, the more threatened the snake feels, the more venom will inject. And vipers can control the amount of venom when they bite. So it makes sense that if the animal feels a lot more threatened than other situations, that it will inject more venom.
Okay, so it's safe to say that if we just encounter a snake, we should just let it be instead of trying to kill it with an axe or a shovel or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's better to try and remove it with slow moves with a long object, rather than try to kill it, and we will stress a lot the snake this way, and we will make it more dangerous for us.
Okay.
It will try to defend itself, so it will try to bite and maybe give us more venom if in the end gets to bite us.
Okay.
Could I comment on that, Thomas?
Of course.
I think this is a very interesting question, because I mentioned the phenomenon of dry bites, where a venomous snake bites but no venom is injected. Well, some people have argued, as Ilias has suggested, that this is the viper intentionally withholds its venom. It's a sort of a conservation of a valuable commodity, an energy expensive commodity that it's synthesized. But I think that the circumstances of many bites in humans are not like that at all, because it's not an elective bite. It's not the snake in its normal environment with attacking a prey species, where I'm sure there is evidence, at least for some species, of metering or measuring the amount of venom according to the prey size. That is not the typical circumstance. Imagine if you tread on a viper in some grass, or if you pick one up inadvertently without meaning to, that means in your hand, in a handful of vegetation. The snake will lash reflexly towards the object, your hand or your foot. And the mechanical effectiveness of the bite may be very poor because it's at an unusual angle, the snake's twisting its neck around and so on. So there may be purely mechanical reasons why venom is not delivered. So I accept everything that Ilias has said about controlling the amount of venom in an elective bite. And certainly if you approach a snake, it may, I suppose, make the decision whether or not it's going to use a lot of venom or a little venom. I still wait to be entirely convinced from the evidence, although there are some quite persuasive papers from the United States on various rattlesnake species. But for other species, I'm slightly less convinced about that. But it is a very important question. And I would utterly agree that you should never approach or attack any sort of snake. I think the attitude be to look at them from a distance and wonder at their beauty, the way they move, the way they live in the environment. And I hate the way these media figures we see on our television, they can't just see a snake, they have to go and handle it, attack it, interact with it. This is all wrong. This is missing the essential beauty of wild snakes in nature. So absolutely, I agree with you. And if you have to remove a snake from your house or from your garden, use a long-handled implement and do it very gently and take it as far away as possible and deposit it away from your property, but don't attack it.
In the northern bit of Greece, at least, there's a network of people. Ilias is getting a lot of inquiries to remove venomous snakes and snakes in general. So that's also, you know, calling an expert is also part of the way to go. So
in Thessaloniki, you can call the police or you can call the fire department, and they will communicate with us. We have a volunteer network that will, if available, come to your house and remove the snake safely.
I would also like to say hi to Professor Christina Maria Tracatelli as well. Great having you with us. And there's now two more sets of questions. One set I have gathered up on snake bites and the other one on antivenom. So we'll try to just make this as smooth as possible. The first one, it says, nice talk, Ilias and Sir David. I wanted to ask, how was the snakebite case from Mapolon Mons Pesolanis treated, if you are aware of that? That's the first part of the question.
No specific treatment. There is no antivenom, and antivenom was not needed. This was very mild but extremely interesting neurotoxicity. And it wasn't just one. There's one case in the French literature, but there's also a small series from the Spanish literature as well on neurotoxic envenoming by Mons Pesolanis.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you the paper. Not this one, sorry. Can you see this screen?
Yep.
Which one do you see, the map or the paper?
The paper.
This is the paper here.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the clinical picture was dominated by neurological symptoms. The patient recovered in 6 days with symptomatic treatment. That's the
Okay.
one.
Thank you. Let's see, there's a quick question for Ilias. Which is the legal status, if there's any legal status on herding wild snakes in Greece, in the countryside?
I had connection problems again.
Okay. Well, we will leave it for the end. Let's just carry on with the bite. So the question reads, does it really work? Does really the nose-horned viper antivenom work on different genus and species of snake as well?
Well, yes, the experience in UK, we used to use this excellent Zagreb Imolotsky Zavrod antivenom, and it was raised purely against Vipera amidites venom, but it was extremely effective against Vipera berus in the United Kingdom, and Vipera aspis in France, and Vipera berus also in Scandinavia. So it does seem to, although this is just a crude clinical observation, it did seem to have paraspecific activity against other Vipera species, even though the sole immunogen was Vipera amidites venom.
Okay, thank you very much for this. The other question reads, if the bites from subspecies, or what is now considered subspecies Vipera amiditis are more severe than other species of vipers and subspecies like Vipera amiditis meridionalis, for example. So would the amiditis have the strongest venom, is the question of them all, if there's any data.
It seems so far, but we are waiting a big split within Vipera amodites sensulatum. I mean, this is a species complex after all, and it needs to be split in different species. So the nominate subspecies Vipera amodites should be a different species than our subspecies, like Vipera meridionalis, Vipera amodites meridionalis. It should be Vipera meridionalis after all. It's probably a different species. The same occurs with the cycladic populations. So we have different evolutionary clades, which are actually different species. And it is reasonable to have different, at least slightly different types of venom between different species of the same genus.
Thank you very much for this.
In a way, Thomas and Ilias, it doesn't matter whether they're different species, because we now know that even within the geographical distribution of single species, there can be enormous variation in venom composition. So, for example, I noticed from the slide you showed from the Ursenbacher paper, Ilias, that what I regard as by far the most dangerous area for amidites bite is the coastal area of Croatia around Split, purely because there's been a lot of publication from there. And that seems to be fairly close to northern Greece. So I'm just wondering whether
there's a pattern,
how it will work out. But really, that we don't have the published data yet, and it would be fascinating if someone collaborating with Juan Calvete could produce a beautiful venomic comparison between the different groups of in the broad sense, amidites, to fit in with the clinical, what seems to be the clinical spectrum of severity.
Thank you very much for this. So the next question for Professor David goes by, how much time do we have in order to rush to the ER before the situation becomes irreparable?
Well, in general, there's plenty of time. But on the other hand, it is a medical emergency. What I mean is, in the popular imagination, the idea of a snake bite is sudden death. And that's not true even from the very potent venomous species we find internationally. Probably the most rapid death you could expect would be after a black mamba bite in Africa, where or a king cobra bite in Southeast Asia. In that case, you might possibly, well, actually, I've seen this in my own patients. You could develop potentially fatal respiratory paralysis of the breathing muscles in less than 30 minutes, 30 minutes, which is pretty quick. But generally with snakebite, there's enough time. And although it is important to get the patient to medical care as soon as possible, you shouldn't be panicky about this. You shouldn't take unnecessary risks. There are, however, some early symptoms, even with Greek and UK viper bites. With Viperoberus, you can get an early anaphylactic syndrome. So patients may faint, they may collapse with low blood pressure only a few minutes after being bitten. But this is never fatal. The blood pressure always comes back again. So provided the patient is laid flat, their blood pressure will come back again. But there are early frightening symptoms which may make people think that death is imminent. But in fact, you have time to apply approved first aid, transport the patient to medical care, and get medical attention.
Can I add something to
Yep.
this? Everybody's different and every person is different. So there's not a single answer to this question, but we can safely say that in Greece, no one has died within hours after a snake bite, but it was only after some few days. There is one case of a man died within minutes because he had an anaphylactic shock that wasn't treated in time. So he died from severe
Anaphylaxis. Mhm.
reaction.
Yes, I mentioned that if people who keep snakes in captivity can become sensitized. For example, we had a death from king cobra bite in UK 3 years ago, very famous king cobra conservationist. And he died within minutes of being bitten by a king cobra. And it was not envenoming. It was because he had become hypersensitized. In the same way, I'm sure the audience knows, if you're stung by wasps or honeybees, you could, or ants even in some countries, you can become hypersensitized in the same way you can to certain sorts of food or drugs. And in those cases, death may, as Ilias is absolutely correct, you can die within minutes of anaphylaxis unless adrenaline is used as a first aid measure.
Mhm. Great.
If I may add a comment on this. Actually, I wanted to make this comment at the end of your discussion because I didn't want to interfere. It's really interesting. But I agree with Professor David and with Ilias. We have to keep in mind the severe systemic anaphylactic reaction. Okay, it is the exception, but we have to keep that in mind. And this is the case that we do not have any time. And unfortunately, this is the case that the fatal end could happen within minutes if adrenaline is not administered to the patient. So this is the only exception to the story that we have to rush to the ED. Of course, it is the exception, but we have to keep that in mind. And adrenaline is the only treatment in this case. Intramuscular administration of adrenaline is the first-line treatment of severe systemic anaphylactic reaction, regardless of the factor that caused it. It could be, in our case, the snake bite. It could be something else. Okay. And at the end, I would also like to make a comment, but sorry for the interruption now.
That's why
Not a problem at all.
that's why everyone should have a medical kit, a first aid kit, and including it an adrenaline pen, just in case.
Exactly, adrenaline intramuscular, which is something that even not healthcare providers, not healthcare people, could actually administer to a person with relatively safety.
Yes, you can get self-administered EpiPen, Anapen. There are various manufacturers which are very easy to use if you're taught how to remove the safety cap and apply the correct end to your body.
Exactly. People that know that have some kind of dangerous, that have some kind of triggers for anaphylactic reactions, carry them with them. This pre-filled syringe with adrenaline.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is a great conversation. I'm not gonna lie. So I will have to move it towards the anti-venom bit. There's 4 questions. Is it okay so that I can carry on with the questions? There's like 4 more and then 2 more on another subject matter. Is everyone agreeing?
Agree?
Okay. I don't want to cut this because it doesn't happen too often. So, Professor Ilias Strachinis from the University of Nicosia in Cyprus says, there's a new approach that goes about using small molecule drugs instead of, I guess he means horse antivenoms. He would like to hear the Professor Warrell's opinion on the matter.
Yeah, this is very exciting. A group of my colleagues have suggested repurposing enzyme inhibitors. And these, I mentioned, I think Ilias and I both emphasized that a large important component of snake venoms are these enzymes like phospholipase A2 and metalloproteinases. Well, there are small molecule inhibitors of these venom enzymes that some of which have already been used for other purposes in human medicine. And the idea is to repurpose them and to see if they would work in snakebite victims. And there's good experimental evidence from animal studies and in the laboratory suggesting that, for example, particularly a drug called Veraspladib, which is a PLA2 inhibitor, might be very effective. Of course, this isn't neutralizing the whole effect of a venom. We've said they're very complex. The enzyme, the inhibited enzyme component, may only be part of the dangerous pathogenicity of a venom, but it certainly would be a very important start, particularly as some of these inhibitors can be taken by mouth. So the idea of a first aid treatment, you pop a tablet of Veraspladib before you go to hospital, is very attractive. However, I'm afraid I must say that this is in the future. It is not an immediate alternative or possibility. A clinical trial has started in India and the United States of Veraspladib, but I've no idea whether the results will be sufficiently convincing. It's very difficult to do clinical trials of snakebite, but it's certainly, this professor from Cyprus has raised the most exciting new hope for treating snakebite victims. And it's not just PLA2 inhibitors, there are also chelating agents, because the metalloproteinases, as their name implies, they use zinc metalloproteinases. If you can chelate the metal, you can inhibit these enzymes. So there are a number of drugs that have been developed to treat heavy metal poisoning, which may be useful as well. So certainly a very exciting thing for the future, but unfortunately, not possibly in my lifetime, certainly not for the present.
I remember Jose Maria Gutierrez from Costa Rica getting a similar question, and I remember him mentioning that it's very, very exciting, but not soon enough. I mean, we're going to have to wait for some more time. So the next question comes from a concerned participant, if I may say so. 2 bits of the question, antivenom related. Could antivenom from Viperamyditis species be used to treat bites from other species? We have already answered this question in part, but that is connected to the fact that the antivenom that we currently are procuring as a country, he mentions, is raised against the Viperamyditis, but we have a total of 4 more species. So what happens with this new drug that is both given intramuscularly and not intravenously, and is only raised against the Viperamyditis and not against the rest of the species? What would be your opinion on that?
Well, you cannot assume paraspecificity. That is, you cannot assume that an antivenom raised against a particular venom or even a group of venoms, in the case of polyspecific antivenoms, will neutralize the venom of any other species. It's most likely if it's a closely related species. So you might say that all the Greek vipera are fairly closely related, but you cannot assume that. The only way to confirm this is, first of all, to explore it in the laboratory. There's a new platform called antivenomics, which is immunodepletion of venom components. You can do that in the laboratory relatively easily with modern technology. Or you can do rodent tests to test the effectiveness in the, as I say, in the laboratory preclinically. Ultimately, the only really convincing evidence is a clinical trial, which is virtually impracticable. So I would say that in the case of Greece at the moment, and I would very much welcome Ilias's opinion on this, that by far the most important species, it dominates your literature, it dominates your country geographically, is Vipera amidites. And the most important thing for Greece would be to have an effective antivenom for Vipera amidites, which can be administered intravenously. Because really, if I may say so, off record, intramuscular antivenom administration is for the dark ages. I'm sorry about that rather rude remark. Please take it in the right spirit.
We will do. This is part of the reason why this is happening, to clarify all of these bits. And the next question goes about, there is a tendency in Greece to give antivenom as a precaution, even if the snake has not been identified that made the bite. Is this the recommended course of action?
Well, I'd say that that's quite a subtle meaning there, because if the patient has signs of envenoming, for example, if they have local swelling and they feel unwell, they're shocked, or anything like that, they have mild coagulopathy, they have definite evidence of severe local or systemic envenoming, then certainly antivenom is indicated. And in that situation, even if you don't know precisely, even if you don't have the dead snake or a photograph of the live snake or an expert field identification of the snake responsible, it's perfectly legitimate to go ahead and give antivenom. I wouldn't call that prophylactic. Prophylactic antivenom would be giving antivenom before any signs of envenoming appeared, just because the patient said they'd been bitten by a snake. And that would never be justified in any country with any snake, I believe.
Okay, because after the discussion we had yesterday, this just reminds me that I was told specifically that it's standard practice, let's say, in Greece to give antivenom before any symptom has arisen as a precaution, so prophylactically. This is not recommended, I assume.
That would not be, that would not conform to modern international practice because of the risks of antivenom. And I thought that antivenom was very scarce in Greece. I mean, before I met Thomas, none of the patients I'd helped to give advice or to share management had been given antivenom. Even the ones who'd been flown to Athens from Greek islands, they had not been given antivenom. So I'm rather surprised that you're going to the other extreme now of giving antivenom, even if there's no sign of envenoming. So that's a bit of a surprise.
Well, what I was told was that 300 vials, let's say, are being procured every year. And then in a time period of 2 to 3 years, they are depleted. So they re-procure the amount. The next question has to do with black widow bites. Are they a critical situation? Is there antivenom for it?
There is antivenom. We have it in UK. It's not made, I think it's probably made in the United States, certainly not made in Europe. But there is antivenom. And I know from my own personal experience in South America that it can effectively curtail these very distressing muscle spasms and facial spasms, the so-called fasces latrodentissima, a sort of grimace,
Yes.
a spasm of the face. The antivenom can be effective in stopping these distressing symptoms. So the answer to the question is yes, there is antivenom, and yes, I believe it to be effective.
They also state in the same question that if you're in Albania, for example, where the person is, and they don't have anti-ractate antivenom, what next? What's next?
Well, most cases worldwide would be treated asymptomatically. So you can try muscle relaxing drugs. You can try calcium gluconate. I don't think it's, there is one study suggesting it's effective to counteract the spasms. So you'd have to treat it conservatively. And really, it's very rarely life-threatening. There certainly have been fatalities from black widow, latrodectus, and brown widow, geometricus bites, but it's extremely rare. So conservative management, not using antivenom, will be highly likely to be effective.
Understood. So at this point, I think the main chunk of questions, I mean, questions just keep coming, but the more specific ones have all been answered. I can give the floor to Professor Fidanidou to carry on with the bits that she mentioned before. So
thank you so much. First of all, I want to congratulate both Professor David and Ilias for their excellent presentations and for a really, really interesting discussion. I want to congratulate you as well, Thomas, because the coordination was really excellent. I want also to thank you for inviting me here in this panel. It's really interesting. I have to admit that we physicians in Greece do not know so many things about snake bites and all of this information that I listened to today. Professor David already mentioned it, that maybe the reason for this under-treatment or wrong treatment in several cases is the lack of experience. We lack of experience. This is the truth. And you mentioned that in this case, on the Greek island, the physicians gave some corticosteroids to their patient. The only reason I can think about that would be that they thought they thought about an anaphylactic reaction, but again, they administered that orally, which is, I mean, there isn't any rationale behind that. So this was a wrong treatment, even in the scenario that they thought this might be an anaphylactic reaction. Antibiotics also have nothing to do with this treatment. So maybe they saw the raised white blood cells, and that's why they administered them. I have to admit, this lack of experience is the reason behind all of those under or wrong treatments. Actually, I don't have anything else to add, because the only thing I wanted to add, I already said that before, and I will repeat it now because I think it's important. In systemic anaphylactic reactions, regardless of the factor that caused them, the first-line treatment is intramuscular epinephrine. And I agree with you, Professor David, it's in the intramuscular administration of the antivenom is really something that should not happen in our years. And I agree with the comment that you made. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. So for anyone that is still, and there's still more than 50 people, this presentation is being recorded. It will be sent to your emails once it's uploaded on YouTube for anyone to see. And this has been part of the reason why we have facilitated this whole event, so that there is, how should I put it, material for doctors or anyone interested in this specific subject matter, and they can just use that link or Google Snakebite Greece, international, European, and they can easily just come about it. So yeah, with this, I think we can conclude today's event, which was clearly a success, I have to say. I'm happy to say that. I'm also, delighted that people joining in from various countries and from various universities. So thank you for that. Thank you to the participants, to the guest speakers, to Professor Fidanidou for being today with us. And I hope that in the future we can do something similar, and that's not an issue at all. Something similar, and yeah, just looking forward to collaborations and initiatives from this one. Thank you for being here with us today, to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Have a
Bye.
good day.
Thank you very much.
You're
Have a
most
good
welcome.
weekend.